So, Jim Smid, CTO of Ironbow Technologies. I'm joined here. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
I'm Eric Oberhofer. I'm the director of the data center practice.
Josh Finke, managing director for Ironbow Consulting.
Excellent. We're going to talk about data center modernization. In particular, we're going to talk about what's happening with the network and what are we going to see in the next few years. So, software-defined networking, SDN, has been a hot topic. A lot of confusion really around what SDN means. Maybe you can just kind of define what SDN is, and we can start from there.
So over the last few years, we've seen software-defined networking really start to take a marketing presence, but product-wise, it hasn't quite got to the point where we're seeing adoption yet. So we've seen some movement in the space. There's a lot of startups. One of them, Nicira, was bought by VMware about 2 years ago. Cisco's had a lot of recent product announcements around the area. And you're starting to see that customers are now starting to ask the questions around, what does it do for me? So really the idea of software-defined networking at its simplest form is similar to when the virtualization wave started taking place in the data center, on being able to take a server that before was maybe specifically built for a certain application or built and then you commonly installed an operating system on it and you used it for that purpose, and then that's the only purpose that server had, and you started to buy really specific hardware. In that case, you started to see that the hardware started to become fairly agnostic. It became a commodity buy, and the virtualization allowed you to run the workloads you need to run anywhere in your data center across those servers. Started to be able to move multiple workloads onto individual pieces of hardware, and you started to see a lot of economies of scale, power efficiency, and there was just a really good usage of the resources that you had. Now we're starting to see that across the network. So we're starting to see that the network no longer has to be a purpose-built appliance that does a specific function, and you need to buy X number of them to do that function. Now you're starting to see that the networking hardware is the same type of idea, where you have that hardware that can be reprogrammed and repurposed to provide intelligence across the network no matter where it is. And what's really interesting now, beyond just the concept of having those efficiencies, is you're starting to see a lot more intelligence in the network. So the application that's out there is really starting to drive how the network's going to be consumed. The application can say, these are the resources I need, this is the quality of service I need, this is the type of application, the type of traffic I have, and the network can then adapt to that individual traffic, and it can provide a stream for that traffic that is different from another application that's right next to it. So that intelligence in the network is really the biggest benefit that we're going to get out of it. And we're starting to see that the intelligence is no longer just in the core of the network, but it's starting to go out all the way to the edge where things are connecting.
So Josh, you talked a little bit about capabilities and benefits. Are there some additional things around management or security concerns or anything else that you would say is going to be kind of some ramifications of or benefits of moving towards software-defined networking?
Yeah, sure. So in the management perspective, you're starting to see that it goes to a different skill set. So the idea of having the network guy talk to the data center guy, talk to the storage guy, you're really starting to see that there's going to be a skill set that goes across those areas now, and we're breaking down those silos. You're also starting to see that you're going to have security baked in across the entire solution. Once you start to have a solution like this, you start to see that there's a lot of movement and flexibility in how things are operating in your network as well as out in the cloud. And software-defined networking is going to enable a lot of interaction between those points, but then you need to have security baked across the entire solution. It really needs to be an ecosystem and really a methodology instead of just looking at point products. So I think the skill sets are definitely going to change. Security is going to become an even more increasing concern. It's really going to have to go across the entire solution. And I think Eric has seen some things in the data center already where you're starting to see that sort of transition happen on the management side that's a lot different from traditional server space now.
So we're starting to see a lot of customers asking about where software-defined networks can really start enabling their missions or enabling their businesses out there. Like Josh mentioned, the products are just starting to come to light, and customers, while they're not necessarily implementing them today, they're making sure that their networks, the equipment that they're buying and the strategies that they have will be compatible with any of the SDN strategies that are coming out from any of the vendors that are out there. Particularly in the data center, we're actually seeing SDN be applicable to being able to program the entire data center. So you might hear the term software-defined networking, software-defined storage. Pretty soon it's going to be software-defined software. A lot of it, you don't know what it actually means. So that's where I like the term of programmable data center much more. You can take cloud automation and orchestration companies out there like Chef and Puppet and really start to codify how you're actually going to start delivering your infrastructures and programming them to kind of auto-create and auto-provision, as well as all the way down to the application level. So when you start talking about being able to define your software networks, you also still need to be able to do that on the storage side as well as the compute side. So that way you can create that the underlying infrastructure for your applications to be developed upon.
So you bring up an interesting point, because I know some of our federal customers have over-procured, be it compute or storage or other resources. Will they be able then, with some of the software-defined data center, be able to reuse and repurpose those for a brand-new intent that wasn't originally purposed for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we want to protect any of the customers' investments out there and figure out a way to being able to leverage those resources for whatever projects they have going forward. The need for new projects is never going to end. So with shrinking budgets and shrinking, IT staff, we need to figure out a way of making the data centers more intelligent to do the operations themselves. So, with SDN and software-defined other technologies, we're able to take those resources, in particular with SDN, we can take existing Cisco switches or Juniper switches and actually apply an SDN controller on top of that to be able to actually provide the intelligence of the network, leveraging multi-vendor technologies underneath. As far as overall data center strategy, we're starting to see a huge movement from the OpenStack community. In particular, this started off in the Intel space in the government. Now we're seeing that start to bleed out more into the DoD and the civilian agencies as the OpenStack community has really matured, as well as more and more vendors and OEMs actually start to contribute code and develop OpenStack strategies for our customers out there.
So you mentioned some of the agencies. Are there agencies that are really thinking about moving towards SDN now?
Yeah, so Eric mentioned the intelligence community really starting there. You see a lot of big data activities that they have, and that really requires a new strategy for working with the network. So the intelligence community certainly started with it. Now we're starting to see, though, that that's moving across other agencies. So you start to see the DoD and their realization that they have to share massive amounts of data, may that be video data. And for them to be able to do that, the network has to be able to adapt at any time to be able to figure out how to bring that data in. In addition, you see it across the civilian space right now. You look at an institute like National Institute of Health, where they get a lot of data from individual areas across the country. They partner with a lot of hospitals and clinics out there. And one of the things that they specifically want to do, a division there at the CDC, they want to be able to track what's happening across the country. And maybe there's an outbreak of a certain type of disease or virus or something like that. That data needs to find a way to be able to get back and be intelligently transported where it needs to go, but you need to be able to do it whenever that data is available. That data may not be a constant stream, so the network needs to be able to adapt and be able to take in that data and then provide results, provide testing, and then provide big data initiatives on top of that. So we're really starting to see that across the spectrum in the federal government, there's an application for it pretty much everywhere. It's just a matter of figuring out how it assists and benefits a workflow.
And so where do you see the adoption? I mean, are we in the beginning stages, and you see that ramping up over the next few years? Are we well along the path?
Yeah, I think we're actually probably pretty much still in the beginning. I mean, you certainly do have some early adopters that are maybe moving into the real implementation and operation phase instead of the planning and design phase. But overall, I think most agencies are still looking at this from a design consideration, trying to figure out what the workload is that they want to be able to run with this, what the benefit they're going to get in their daily operations. But we are starting to see that there are adoption cases out there where they are being fully operated, and we're starting to see use cases where it is a maturing technology. Even though there are going to be a lot of changes still, I think we truly are starting to see the benefits that are tangible and measurable.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that it hasn't caught on as fast is because the OEMs, they're actually slow to actually productize and get their products out to market, develop the use cases around that, as well as the human capital skill sets, the traditional IT admins, they don't have the skill sets to properly be able to manage true SDN and programmable data centers out there. So we need to be able to, they need the core basis of, their networking skills and then their other data center skills. But on top of that, they actually need to also develop developer skills, to being able to code, in XML, JSON, REST, RESTful APIs. API calls is going to be the way of the future, that from an application all the way down to the hardware itself, it's one communication method between all the different layers out there. So as an IT community, everyone needs to start developing those skill sets out there.
Definitely.
So you mentioned the Nicira acquisition a few minutes ago, and I think certainly that was a bellwether of things to come and really raise the awareness for a lot of our customers in terms of thinking about SDN and researching SDN. Are there any announcements or technologies that's coming out from other vendors in the last few months that are really going to advance that adoption rate and make it more applicable for a larger audience?
Yeah, so I think if you look at what Cisco's announced with the Nexus 9000, the 9K, as well as the ACI application-centric interface, we're starting to see that that is a very strong position from Cisco on how they're going to be looking at the market. You also see things in the open source community like OpenFlow that has had some recent announcements, and you start to see some adoption around there and integration into OpenStack. Cisco's response to that is really a approach of having a defined network that is control across the network and intelligence out across the network. So their announcements around that and the announcements that they have upcoming here in the summer are going to be, I think, really an area that a lot of customers will look to. And a lot of customers have Cisco networking equipment right now that they're trying to figure out how do we leverage this for the future. And now I think we're starting to see that these announcements are going to really provide a future proof for the solutions and enable them to be flexible with what they have now and their resources.
Great. So any recommendations you would make for next steps for customers looking to adopt SDN in the future?
So I think most likely for any customer, you should really step back and think about the business model that you have and, leverage a resource like Iron Bow here and, leverage our expertise to be able to figure out how SDN can benefit you. The question isn't really, can I use SDN? I think it's how should I use SDN? I think everybody has a use case for SDN. It's a matter of figuring out, what the business workflow and what the business outcome they're really looking for. It shouldn't be a technology conversation as much as it's be how can I make my business more efficient or how can I make my operation or mission more efficient and be able to get it done in a better way.
Your SDN strategy needs to be consistent with what's going on in the rest of your data center and how you're going to be delivering applications and delivering data to your end users, be it the warfighter or someone, one of your business analysts. So you need to make sure that everything from the infrastructure side and your application side is all kind of is being merged together, which is it can be quite daunting. So that's why you kind of need to take a step back, like Josh mentioned, and figure out what is your mission requirements, what is your business requirements, and contact experts like Iron Bow to kind of help you and guide you in the right direction.
Great. Well, appreciate that. And we're talking about software-defined networking, but also dabbing a little bit in kind of software-defined everything, right? And any final comments for the group?
I think it's exciting to see. We've seen cloud certainly talked about for a few years now, and this idea of software-defined networking has certainly started to gain traction. But I think we're really starting to see the adoption take place now, and that's exciting to see and see how it benefits our customers.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.